Hi, I'm Brian Yuzna, the director of Society, and we're here today to watch it and remember.
And I'm David Gregory, and I'll be chatting with Brian about the movie.
That's the Rose Tournament House in Pasadena. Very important for the Tournament of Roses, and a surprising place to set a strange movie like this.
How did you get it? Was it expensive?
No, that was the place we could afford. We only used the outside. The inside is, this is all set here. Of course, this is the prologue to bookend the action of the movie. This was a script that was brought to me by Rick Fry, that he wrote with Woody Keith. And I often joke that the movie is actually autobiographical by Woody. Woody was a Beverly Hills kid who really did think that the people that the society that his parents were a part of was a strange and paranoid universe. The script didn't have the more surreal aspects when I got it, but we quickly remedied that with the help of Screaming Mad George, the effects artist, and of course the great collaboration of Woody and Rick. It was certainly a great experience to work on. This is all a set. And we were trying to do subliminal things with the movie, both visually and audially. So even when doors open, for example, in this scene, with the sound of the door opening is screams.
Of course, you cast Billy Warlock here.
Yeah, Billy Warlock. He was at that time he was kind of a soap player. He did soaps, I think, and he was up for Baywatch, which is what he eventually kind of was pretty famous for. I think, if I'm not mistaken, that Billy was from a movie family. I think his father was a stunt guy.
Yeah, he played Michael Myers in a couple of the Halloween movies, I think.
And I love this guy, Ben Slack, Dr. Cleveland. And this was certainly a scene that Woody Keith was very familiar with, seeing the shrink. Here's our first indication that this is going to be a surrealistic type of movie, not exactly literally realistic.
Yeah, you actually you mentioned this in the interview, but these worms coming out of the apple here, you are actually suggesting that obviously he does have hallucinations.
It's supposed to be literal, but of course it's absolutely ridiculous to think there'd be so many worms in an apple. So I think it's just a style. This, of course, is actually a taste of what's to come, and I'm not sure how much you really get out of it. I've always been a real fan of credit sequences in movies, especially from watching the old Roger Corman Poe movies, which I saw as a kid, and that really impressed me. And I just loved how the credit sequences were really colorful and kind of abstract. Here we kind of were making a movie that was a bit of a sucker punch type of movie, in that the third act just kind of blows up into a very surprising direction. And so this was a way to do something that gave you the discomforting feeling that the ending is supposed to. And it looks pretty clear to me what's going on, but I'm not sure what an audience thought when they first saw it and knew nothing about the movie, how they would have interpreted it.
And what's the song that's playing in the background?
That is I think it's based on the Eaton Boat song.
Yeah.
And it's in the U.S. it's not recognized at all. The producers, Keith Wally and Paul White, are both from England, and the composers, who did the score, are also British. So they actually worked over there, and sent the Mark Ryder and Phil Davies, I think, were the composers, and it was their idea to take the Eton Boat Song, and in England, of course, that's kind of a very classist type song. It's really identified with the upper class. So by using that, it's kind of a parody, I would guess. In a sense, the movie's almost a parody. I guess it is, in a way. Of what? Of culture, I guess.
I mean, it seems like the way that the sister here is acting and the family acts, it's obviously very kind of plastic-like. I mean, is this how you directed them?
This was the 80s. This was the 80s, and this was kind of I sort of felt like I was doing like a high school movie, the kind of movies that you saw in the 80s, and it's sort of the styles of the 80s, and I like the idea of doing high school kids, and so yeah, I think this really is really clearly like the 80s. I think the photography was by Rick Victor, and Rick Victor, this was his first feature film. He never made many of them, but Rick was he had a really big career as a not an effects photographer, a second unit kind of effects unit photographer for all the big effects movies, The Right Stuff, the Alien 3, big movies for ILM, Indiana Jones. So he was used to having these huge budgets to do big effect sequences. This is back before CGI, and very careful photography matching the biggest stuff in the world. And he just wouldn't get a chance to do a feature. So he got, I liked working with him, and I think the photography is very good, and it's meant to be like a teen comedy, I guess. It's meant to be a high school movie.
Yeah, it's very bright and sunny, which horror movies aren't generally, but obviously those teen movies of the 80s, they all kind of look like this.
Yeah, and at this point, we're already trying to introduce this sort of uncomfortable feeling amongst the daughter and the parents, that sort of a sexual undercurrent, and Billy being on the outside. He can't even get a word in. He's obviously not part of this family. He feels separate. And at this point, I felt like I needed to put in something fantastic, something to let you know that it's not just worms out of an apple, but if you hang in there, we're gonna see something more. And that's where we have the coming up this sort of bladder effect on Billy's sister's back, and I think that tells you that this isn't going to be a normal movie.
Now, can you talk a little bit more about? It sounds like you did some research into the subversive nature of horror movies, because you were talking a bit about incest being something that people have the most common negative reaction to and scared reaction to. What's that about?
Once I started, I never studied film, either film history or filmmaking. I just got into it because I thought it might be fun. But once I started making movies, I felt like I needed to learn more about it, and I've always been interested in horror movies. So I read a lot about horror movies, and you start, some trains of thought are that they're all about taboos, And one of the major taboos, and in one book I read that the taboo of incest is almost underneath most horror movies. That's sort of a taboo that we don't really question. And it was in the script already that I got from Woody and Rick, because the inciting event, which is when Blanchard gives them the tape of the shunting, is really disturbing because there's incest. There's this feeling of the family doing terrible things, doing sexual things together, and I think that puts you so uncomfortable. I like this scene, of course.
And that's Devin DeVasquez.
That's Devin DeVasquez. And she was a beauty. I'm sure she still is a beauty. I haven't seen her in years. But she was great. And that's Ferguson next to her.
Ben Meyerson.
Ben Meyerson. And I'm surprised that Ben Meyerson didn't have a bigger career. You never know what people get into. But I thought he was really terrific. He was a great bad guy, but kind of a very sympathetic bad guy.
So one of the things that was always a little bit confusing to me was that he is a very popular kid in school. So why does he have this feeling that he's not?
That's the thing. It's that it wouldn't be a very interesting story if it was about a loser who wanted to be a winner. We take someone who is the winner, and he goes, you know what? I'm the winner. I've got everything, and yet I still feel like something's going on. And here we get it. Here he comes in. He's already going to a shrink. You know, he's got everything. He's a privileged kid. He's a part of society. He's a part of Beverly Hills in a way that other people just want to be. It's not like new money or something. But it turns out that he really is insecure. And then we find out, he says, gee, I'm not like my parents. They don't like me.
I think I'm adopted.
I think I'm adopted. And how many people haven't thought that as they were undergoing puberty? You can't be a part of these jerks that you are, this family. How could you be a part of it? Something's wrong. And of course, he's, also very repressing, in my mind, his attraction to his sister, which is also completely common, But in a horror movie, of course, we want to bring these things out to the surface like worms out of an apple.
Well, and he also gets manifested with the fact there's a lot of parallels between him and Blanchard and him end up being sort of in cahoots. And of course, Blanchard's a voyeur of his sister, and he gets caught almost being a voyeur. And, so he might actually think that really just underneath it, he's just another Blanchard.
He could feel that way. Blanchard always seemed to me like he really wasn't a part of, he was an outsider. And we even made him Jewish, so that would make him more of an outsider. But, in the world of society, there's this society species is cross-cultural and cross-racial. So there would be a whole Jewish society too. We were just trying to find anything we could to make people on the outside. And of course, this is a scene that we added to the script that was in order to bring up a little stronger the incest thing, and also to give us another taste of what's to come. And actually, this scene is actually mentioned a lot by fans when they talk to me. They really like this particular shot right here. And this was a shot that actually, this effect was not prepared for by Screaming Mad George. He had a lot on his hands, and I insisted I needed something, and he insisted he didn't have time, And I said, listen, just put some fake breasts on her back and we'll put ripple. He was very upset that I was insisting on this, but actually the effect works great. Sometimes the simplest stuff works the best. And this set, it was that was a set, and with not a lot of resources. Matt Jacobs, who actually didn't, I think, do any other kind of genre movies much, did a terrific job. You know, with very little. That bathroom looked pretty good. Mm-hmm. So does the hallway. You know, I never really thought it didn't match the house. This is kind of just a surreal idea, these slugs things that I think finally makes some sort of aesthetic sense in the movie. Some things don't, but on a lot of this stuff we were working from just vague inspirations, and then I would just put them out there and see if we develop it into something. And I loved the slug thing. I thought it really matched the shunting.
Yeah, it's the movement and the slime and all those things.
Yeah,
it seems
and
like
also,
they would be interesting.
And also slugs are ambisexual, and they have these incredible orgies, evidently, where they all kind of pile onto each other and just, all take all sides of it.
Wait, how did you find out about slug orgies?
I looked it up. I mean, I research things. I do a lot of... I'm all about the movie being that 10% of the iceberg that's above the water, and underneath it is where all the basis is. So I came up with whole kind of histories and mythologies behind this, the shunting and what this was about. So I thought that, so I did. I read into slugs, and I thought it was odd that they kind of would plant the seed by just sort of like breaking through the skin of the other one. There is no real orifice to receive it. And this, I thought Heidi was really a funny. She made a real funny character out of Shauna. I think she's really I don't know. She seems like a girlfriend I might have had. She's such a ball buster for Billy.
Whereabouts was the beach?
This is Paradise Cove, and actually that's my son coming in. I nepotistically gave my little kid a part in the movie, and you can't really understand what he says, and it's too bad because when he squirts the foam, which is the lotion, which I think is hilarious because he squirts it right into her face and she's worried about her hair, but but then he says, "Die, alien scum," and I think that goes by you, but I thought that was important. And of course here we have a very kind of a dominant scene by Clarissa. I think this is hilarious. It's just like a Russ Meyer type of thing. And of course, and to get that shot, we had to like dig a hole way down in the sand just to get that angle. But I thought Billy did a great job here. This is Paradise Cove in Malibu, and it's a great beach to take. I would take my family there because this is where I'd hang out on Sunday, and because it was really enclosed, and the parking lot is right on the sand, and there's a restaurant and a sports bar there, so I could go in and drink beer and watch the Lakers while they were out at the beach. So that's Paradise Cove. And this was kind of hilarious here.
Well, I never quite understood how Devin DeVasquez's mum fit into society.
Well, she's, if you're a part of it, you're a part of it. You don't have to you don't have to, it's like any aristocracy. You don't have to even have money if you're in the aristocracy. You can behave badly and still be in it. And you can be a merchant and work your ass off and be just as perfect as you can, and you'll never be accepted in it. So I think that's the idea of society. You don't join it by having a lot of money. I think in the U.S. people never quite understood the idea of being in society isn't just having money. You know, somebody with a lot of money, you're not part of the ruling class. In you know, European countries, they understand that better, especially in UK, that, you know, there's no way, it's not a porous border. It takes generations to breed your way into the ruling class, and nouveau riche doesn't make it. The waves were never good enough here, but, you know, sometimes they are. This was the first day of shooting. I think this was the exact first shot of the whole shoot. And I remember being out there with my bathing suit and my T-shirt and looking at the beach and saying, this is great. I'm always going to shoot at the beach. Girls in bikinis, bright sun. What fun.
I think what you'll find in paragraph 10 will excite you.
Dad, something's wrong with one of my earrings.
I was never a big fan of this this set decoration because I just thought they should have had better taste than that. But
What about the paintings that they've got? In the background?
I forget who did those paintings, but I think Matt Jacobs came up with all these. These were paintings that he borrowed, and we tried to get stuff that was kind of physical and with blending and kind of some dark undertone. What's funny about this little microphone in the ear thing is today it's totally acceptable, totally believable. Back then it was pretty far out, very sci-fi. And in some ways this is my favorite scene of the movie, because this is, I think when I read this in the original script, it just grabbed me. It just seems so weird. And I think it's a very disturbing scene. And I think Billy reacts in a very realistic way to it.
Just listen to the tape. Listen.
I remember my own coming out. I was so excited.
Then you can do it with women as well as men.
Of course.
You know the schedule. First we dine, then...
Had you attended any sort of coming out parties or anything like that in the Deep South?
In the South, where I went to high school in Atlanta, and I lived in Chapel Hill, North Carolina for quite a few years, married a Southern girl. They had what they called the cotillion. And I must say, I think the Shauna character and her friend, they were quite a bit like some of the high school girls when I was growing up. I don't know how they are today, but that's not so far. I mean, they were really like that. I don't think they did this kind of stuff, but I thought that I never went to a coming out or a cotillion or anything. I wasn't part of that. I was never part of society. I was never really anywhere close to it. This is all Woody Keith stuff, you know. I think I would have a hard time just writing characters, you know, like that.
Now, did you ever meet Woody Keith's family?
I just briefly on the set. I think his mother came out.
And what was she like?
Very nice. I mean, he had told me stories, and I worked with Woody on a few more movies before he became religious. And always just thought he was one of the most interesting people I'd ever known. And he told me a lot of stories, but I never saw anything odd. I mean, he's got some very odd stories, Beverly Hills stories.
So he dropped out of the movie business?
Yeah, he did. He directed a few movies. He worked on scripts for me on Bride of Reanimator, for example. But then he made a few movies of his own. He directed, and then he moved to New Mexico. And now I think he has a blog out there.
Bill, now come on. Bullshit, man. You rigged it. What, you've been living with these people all your life and you didn't know anything about this? Shut up! Give me this. No. Bill, Lance, come on. Don't do it. Come on. Here's your stupid recorder. I'll do it. Bill, wait!
Again, it seems like, you know, your production design here, it seems it's very in tune with the themes of the movie.
Yeah, this actually was a house in Hancock Park, which is a very nice section of L.A., sort of South Hollywood, around Wilshire. Beautiful, huge houses. I'm surprised we got this place. And we used the entrance, which is beautiful. Matt put in the sculpture and such. And the office, the shrink's office is in that house. So it's a beautiful place. But I thought it really looked good for this. And I thought Ben Slack was fantastic. I really think he did a great job. He just seems like that real smarmy shrink, you know. You just couldn't trust him. And we didn't mention back where Billy's father was talking to the judge, David Wiley. Wow, he was great. What a fantastic guy. And I love Heidi's reaction here. All she cares about is the party.
Absolutely.
And I like her lipstick and her hair and that big sweater. It's just great. I just think it all really fits. And that's Evan Richards in the background. And actually, I've seen Evan over the years. And actually, he lived in London for a while. I've found him on the same flight as me going from LA to London. And he actually was the star of one of the stars of Mute Witness, which is a terrific kind of horror movie from, I guess, the 90s.
Yeah, he's just directed his own movie, I think.
Yeah. And this was a whole thing from the script where where Billy's being kind of tormented by all these weird things with no big mystery. And I think that that's something that I guess that was needed just to keep your interest. It's kind of just a red herring.
Yeah, because when you're doing something that's so kind of heavily weighted towards that big payoff, you've got to do something to keep everybody...
Yeah, you've got to have some misdirection. And the misdirection is that. So there's this whole kind of oddball mystery, which actually has a very unsatisfying resolution.
Everybody in?
All in.
Yes, Dad.
All right, girls, don't forget the seatbelts.
Fast forward a little bit.
And, you know, I'm wondering what people might have thought who just saw this without any preparation, know anything about it back in the day. If you would, I guess you would know that Billy is right and they're wrong.
Presented.
No. No.
Oh my God, it's so exciting.
Don't worry, dear. We'll be there to help you.
I felt really bad that Bill couldn't come. I hope he doesn't feel left out.
We're very proud of your brother, Jen. It's just unfortunate that he couldn't be with us.
That's not what I heard. Billy.
I never came to it cold, so I just wonder. Right here, you've got to know that the shrink is kind of fooling them.
Oh yeah, no,
you got to
absolutely.
know that this isn't. I like this line. This is a Woody Keith line. Some people make the rules, and I think this. See, to me, I wanted when they were releasing the movie, I wanted them to put on the poster a true story, not based on, because in my mind, from an aesthetic point of view, it's real. I think this is like reality, but with fun. It's like some people make the rules, some people have to follow them, and you know which one you are.
Now, how long had you been in LA when you made this movie?
I moved to LA in '84 with my family.
So that's 4 or 5 years before you made it.
We made it in '88.
Right.
Yeah.
So what did you think of the world of Beverly Hills and Bel Air when you first got here, which most people think is another world?
Yeah, I really just wanted to have one of those houses. I've never been the kind of person that doesn't. I'd love to have a huge, beautiful house with great grounds and everything. You know, you can see our budget here that Blanchard had such a crappy van. I always thought that was terrible. Normally the car guys, when you have a transpo guy, they can get you all kinds of cool cars. But I guess because we had to turn the van over, they could only get something that was kind of not very good, you know.
Is he dead?
And this guy here, the cop, is David Wells, who I worked with quite a bit and over the years. And I really think he's good too. I always liked working with him. He was always, didn't matter what the part was, he would just really go for it. He had I just thought he had a real kind of smarmy kind of cop feeling.
Now, this is one of the few scenes in the movie that actually has some blood in it as well. Do you want to talk about your decision to do that?
I didn't want to put blood in any of the movie or certainly not the shunting, because I knew it was going to be so weird and it had sort of a sexual connotation, and I just thought, boy, we're just really stacking the deck on us. And whereas with Reanimator, for example, which was all gore and I paid for, I could just choose to do whatever I wanted, and I didn't take it to the MPAA. So I just didn't bother getting a rating. Whereas this was being financed by Wild Street, and I knew that we had to have an R rating. And secondly, I thought having blood in the shunting would take away from the whole fun and idea of it. All of a sudden, you'd be reacting to the wrong thing. With Blanchard and the truck, I felt like you have to have blood so that it really makes the statement that he's dead. We didn't want to, I mean, you never see his face dead. That's always a problem. I mean, we know the rules. If there's a little door open, it probably means he's not dead. But
Well, you see him in a coffin.
Yeah, then they go to the coffin. So that's good. So we're trying to make it so he's really dead. And I like the way all these guys act, that the party is so important. And I think that's really, you know, for society, it's not, you're not worried about like how to pay the bills or getting a job or what. What you're worried about is the servants and the party and where you fit in.
Right. And of course, this is a scene, and there's already been precursors that goes back to what you were saying before, that certainly the audience knows that Billy isn't completely insane. These people do have their priorities a little skewed.
Yeah, very skewed. I know, I'm so sorry, Billy. You know, it's like, hey, what are you going to wear? And I like Charles Lucia and Connie Denise as the parents, because I mean, you've got to give them credit. They're actors. I buy them as like, you know, sort of society people.
Yeah, and I was going to ask about that. Actors like that, they've done a fair bit of acting, as opposed to the young kids who, you know, they would have taken any movie to get into a movie.
Yeah.
These guys, when they read the script, didn't they think, what the hell am I getting myself into?
Oh yeah, and that's what you run into with this. The kind of movies I make, almost always I run into that. It's really hard to find actors who want to take a chance on being in something like that. They really don't want to do that. What they want is to get to be stars, and they want to have big roles. They want to have a respectable career. And I'm not sure that, you know, doing this type of movie doesn't really, you got to be a certain kind of person to just go for it. You know, this scene was very tricky for me because when we had all the people out there, I'd never just, you know, it's my first time directing. And wow, I just was like, what do I do with all these people? You know, and it turns out now I've done lots of scenes with hundreds of extras and stuff, and it doesn't, it doesn't really. I know how to do it. It doesn't really faze me anymore. But boy, the first time it was really tough.
Did you find after you directed this that yeah, you want to be directing as well as producing?
Yes, I did. Everybody feels that way. The actor wants to be a producer on the movie because he's so out of control. I mean, every actor, it's terrible, I think, to be an actor because you don't control anything, You don't control the dialogue. You don't control, the director tells you how to block. You have to get it. Maybe you can do with your costume. And then they can use the wrong take. So if somebody tells you, hey, try it this way, you're going, should I really try it this way? Or are they going to use it? What if it's bad and you use it? And that's, I think, so an actor goes, I want to be a producer. I want to have some control over how this thing's handled. And I think when you produce, you want to direct, because the director keeps deciding what he wants to do. Once he's on the set, you're out of control. And if you're the director, you want to produce, because the producer can tell you, oh, we can't get that. Oh, we don't have any money for that. Oh, we got to have this. No, you got to cast her. So at one point, you just want to control everything, which is probably a huge mistake. But I think it's natural. Some people, I think, are talented enough, and I think the really talented people who are also able to work with, big money, they naturally become in control because they're capable of delivering something on that level. And then there's a whole level of producing where you try to get real inexperienced directors who have no cachet so that they'll just do what you want them to do. Just because you're a director doesn't mean that it's going to be your vision out there. A producer can make the movie he wants to make. So after this I thought, man, I want to run the whole production. By the way, this scene was shot the same evening as the first day of shooting on the beach, and we put the scene inside a tent like that so we could shoot it in the parking lot of Paradise Cove, and because we didn't have enough time out at this location. And I like the lighting inside the tent that Rick did with he sort of used a lot of different sort of colored gels and from different angles, and I thought it gave it kind of a creepy kind of party feeling. But yeah, Woody, when we were preparing it, Keith was pretty. He was busy with other stuff, and we didn't have a green light yet, and so I was working on getting a budget and breaking it down, doing the script, and I had a PA. I was one guy helping, and that was Gary Schmuller. And Gary Schmuller is actually the older brother of David Schmuller, who did a quite famous genre movie called Tourist Trap, which I'm not sure how well known it is now, but it was quite an influential movie. And he made other movies, and for example, he made this crawl space movie with Klaus Kinski that was actually shot in the soundstage next door to the soundstage that we were shooting Dolls in Rome at the same time. And Gary came out of the construction industry in Texas. I think he came out, and because David was a movie director, he decided to try movies. And he got on, and David knew Keith Wally, and he got on as the lowest, a PA. That's an entry-level job. I think everybody knows what they are by now with all these commentaries and stuff. And before we started shooting, he was the production manager. He just controlled everything. And in fact, he ended up being my producing partner on the next few movies. We shared producer credit, and we were really partners. And it was a good partnership, too. This location was a house in Toluca Lake, and if I remember correctly, Billy was really not comfortable with this. And Clarissa Devon was very comfortable, and she really liked how uncomfortable Billy was. And it actually worked for the scene, but he was really not comfortable. This wasn't an act. And he just, I'm sure he wasn't used to doing this.
Yeah, because he was daytime soap boy before this.
And Clarissa was just gorgeous and completely okay with it. I remember on the morning before we shot this stuff, I had to work out how to do the body twisting bit at the end of this scene. And back then we couldn't just do effects, and you didn't have digital. We had to, and I thought, well, let's just do it with 2 people, 2 girls. So she brought in a friend, and I got the living room closed off by the PAs and sort of had them both kind of get on the sofa and get into different positions. And I remember thinking at that time, this is a great job. I think maybe directors certainly are maybe more voyeur than other types of psychoses or neuroses. I certainly am. I never wanted to be an actor. I didn't want to be the one doing it, but I sure like telling people what to do.
So that was just some modeling, because she was a model.
That's
before
just
this,
another,
right?
yeah, and that was just another girl under the sofa. Mm-hmm. We just had to fit
But
them
a friend
around.
of hers.
Yeah, it was a friend because it's pretty close quarters. So
Yeah.
you don't want to you can't just get anybody.
You were in a funny position.
Oh, Billy, you're so sweet. I wonder when exactly you lost your virginity.
See? That's Bill's Jeep.
I love Heidi here.
I can't believe he would do this to me. Oh, come on.
I love that. Wrong. I just thought this is like Heathers,
Mm-hmm.
I thought society fits into the Heathers and parents type kind of level of the world in the late 80s. I mean, this is really an 80s movie. It really responds to the 80s. And actually the storyboard artist, Pete Von Schulle, who I did many movies with and was great. Pete's a great storyboard artist, comes up with great ideas. And he had done Heathers. And he showed me, that was one of the ways he got the job. He showed me the Heathers stuff.
Who's that?
I don't know. We better get out of here.
Oh, shit. Clarissa.
Don't ask me about the hair, because it was just one of those ideas like the Slugs, except it didn't quite ever come together. Didn't ever dovetail with any
Well, that's
other
what I mean.
aesthetic.
When I ask about her being a part of society, her kind of
she's choking up a
strangeness
hairball.
is different
Well,
from
you see,
everybody else.
Woody Keith wrote about her choking up a hairball, and who knows what it means. So I just thought it had something to. So that's why I had the judge, Wiley, do the choke up the hairball at the end of the shunting.
What are you doing?
Lighten up, Billy boy. Drink your tea before you drool.
So what's with her?
She does things I don't like.
Devon, on the first night of shooting for her, we were out at what's the canyon where we were? We were at Griffith Park, and she was in the parking lot, and she was all real excited. It was the first kind of big role she ever had, and it turned out she was dating Sylvester Stallone. So while I was talking to her, she called that Sylvester Stallone up on her cell phone. Even back then, I'm trying to figure out how she had a cell phone. It must have been one of the really big ones, because you had to have them plugged in somewhere. And she was, or maybe she told me she had called him, or maybe I don't remember, but she called Stallone to brag that she had a big part he didn't think she could get,
I wonder if he ever saw the movie.
I doubt it.
Shauna,
So are you happy now?
what do you mean?
What a bitch that Clarissa Carlin is. You think that you can do anything
All right,
you
look,
want and
look,
get
just
away
calm
with
down
it.
and let me explain.
So, was she a good fuck?
I just like Heidi. I think she's just a great high school girl from the 80s and from my era. I certainly knew her. See, she had a good car.
Yeah.
She couldn't drive it though.
No.
And we had to think of what kind of cool car Billy would have. And back then, that was pretty cool. And this is where we get a little creepy with the family. I never thought their bedroom actually was quite posh enough. But what happens in it's good enough. And this was where I think Charles Lucia started getting on the nerves of the girls. I think he was a bit too smarmy for him.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
What,
But I had
character.
yeah, well, yeah, just even in this, yeah. And I think that, but I kind of talked to him, and it wasn't his fault because I told him to be. I said, make him really uncomfortable, go really far with it. And then the actresses just thought he was too far,
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, the paintings really work, I think, for the story.
You'll do our whole family proud.
Now, of course, the real star of the movie is the effects, and
Yeah.
Screaming Mad George, he has a background and he loves surrealism.
Mm-hmm.
And I guess you mentioned that you do too. Did you guys hit it off talking about that initially?
Immediately. Like I said, he was recommended by the financiers, who were Japanese. And I'm trying to remember their names. I think it was Keizo Kabata. They weren't really that involved. They weren't involved on a day-to-day basis.
Is it Terry
the-
Ogisu and
Yeah,
Keizo Kabata?
Kabata. Yeah, and they weren't involved in the day-to-day of the movie, but it was, through Paul got the money. They were the Japanese side of things, and they suggested Screaming at George. He was kind of well known in Japan. He was an effects artist in L.A., and when I was introduced to him, we went over to his house and watched Andalusian Dog and looked at his artwork and looked at books of Dali, and we were just immediately off and running. And he was one of my favorite collaborators in my movies. I always tried to get him involved because he's just somebody that I really sync with very, very well. Now, this effect I didn't like, okay? That one I didn't like. It was supposed to be that the whole cheek would cave in. And it was just a little cracky thing.
Mm-hmm.
And that, to me, looks realistic. I think, yeah, you put makeup on a dead guy, you could easily crack. But the idea is he's supposed to touch the face, and the whole thing would crumble and be hollow inside. It's not a body.
Right.
And that, I don't know why that was a difficult one to do, and I shouldn't bring up the ones that I wasn't thrilled with, but that was not the idea.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
This was an actual mortuary that we shot in. I forget where it is, somewhere here around South Hollywood or something in L.A. The offices for Wild Street Pictures were on Sunset, across the street from the Pig and Whistle, which is a very famous and long-running pub in L.A., and where we would go every afternoon they have a nice courtyard there to have happy hour. And most of the movie was shot right around our area. The stage was called the GMT stages, which is Great and Mighty Things. So it's a Christian stage down off of, I think, Stalker, between La Cienega and La Brea. So it's sort of one of the routes you used to go to the airport if you're coming down from Hollywood. And it was kind of a modern place. and I think they were pretty. This isn't the kind of movie they had in mind.
I mean, did you have a fake script or anything? Did they even
No,
need to
no.
see a script?
I've never gone into that except in where have I done fake scripts? I think only in Indonesia. I never did that kind of stuff. You know, in L.A. it's not really like that.
Right, you don't need
you
to
know.
submit a script to use the stage, I suppose.
No. I mean, if they don't want to rent it, they don't have to rent it. But there's lots of competition.
Yeah.
You know, and this is over at Griffith Park, so this is that night. All this outdoor stuff was in Griffith Park. And this was something that I storyboarded with Pete very extensively. I storyboarded the movie a lot, and most of the movies I've done lots of storyboards and tried to have very specific shots. I'm not sure if it really shows that well, if it really, if I was rigorous enough. But I did have this, this was all done, shots from inside and outside the house. And this, of course, is just the MacGuffin. It's just the red herring.
Mm-hmm. What do you mean by it? You don't know if it shows that it's storyboarded compositionally, or?
I think that I always, here's another bit of gore.
Oh yeah.
I always, I think almost always, I've really storyboarded quite extensively the movie. And, but I don't think my movies, I don't think as a director and composition and all that, I don't think I'm that, it's not that extreme. But I do the shots all ahead of time. I'm not. I think except for a couple times, it's really been much more extreme. Worked better. Which, for example, The Dentist was very minimalist, and that was the only movie I've ever done where I couldn't even afford a storyboard artist. So I did the boards, and this was done by Pete Von Schulle.
Where's this?
This is Griffith Park. There's a big parking lot, and all this stuff's in Griffith Park. Then he hits the fence, and then we're back in Toluca Lake. Once he gets across the fence, we just cut to an angle of Toluca Lake.
I remember Billy Warlock saying when he came to England for the premiere of Society, was the one time where he really felt like a movie star, because it was just after Baywatch started, and he was there, I think, with a co-star of Baywatch he was dating at the time, and they actually had
really
paparazzi when he came off the plane and all that kind of thing.
Oh, cool. I always thought this house wasn't great enough for her. I thought it should have been more of a mansion. But we need it. This is Toluca Lake. I mean, it's a really nice house, as you can tell, but I always thought they should all have, kind of more formidable presences. But I think it all works.
Yeah.
They're all in society. It doesn't matter,
Yeah, I mean, did you go location scouting for the houses? Was it a matter of budget that they
Oh,
weren't
yeah,
big
it's
enough?
all budget. It's
Yeah.
all budget because this is, of course, not a big budget movie. Compared to low budget today, it would be. That's the crazy thing, because today with digital, it's like, man, there's no cost to lab, no film, post is almost nothing. I mean, you can make a movie so much, so much cheaper today. But this is This was a low budget movie, and you just can't. You couldn't afford a ton of money into the locations.
Mm-hmm.
Today, you don't need so much lighting. You don't need to pull cable. You can shoot with these LED lights, which are on batteries. You don't need such a big crew. The cameras are so sensitive, and people are used to a different type of. They're used to jerky stuff, and they accept it. Not that I would necessarily do it, except for a reason, but I think I think I mean, it's just cheaper today, you know, and of course the market's less.
It'll be a lot less pleasant.
What now? You can go home with me.
I'm not in the mood, all right?
Hey, that's not what I meant.
So this movie was set up as a 2-picture deal.
It was basically, I needed to do something. I wanted to direct then, and I decided that I would dangle the Reanimator sequel and make sure it was the second movie, so that if I was a complete idiot directing, I would still get another chance. That's in a nutshell.
Were they happy with it when you delivered the movie?
Yes, they were, because I think it was definitely seemed like more of a production than what they had been doing, and it was a bigger budget too than the ones they had been doing, and I think it was unique and it worked, you know, and it sold. So I mean, they were happy with it.
Now, you were making Bride of Reanimator when this movie came out, but it was one that I think they had a bit of trouble marketing, finding, you know, a poster image for and things like that. Because you don't want to give too much away in the post, but at the same time you want to make out that it's a
it's funny.
horror
I
movie.
never really had I've never been very. My idea of what a poster should be for a movie is kind of pretty low end. So, for example, when we started to work on Reanimator, I had some artwork done by Bill Stout for a poster, and it was, you know, the head giving head. That's what I thought we were selling. When Empire took it to the markets, they sold the little bottle of glowing stuff. That's the difference between someone who actually sells and someone who's just kind of a fan. And I think with Society, I probably would have put the Butthead up there or something. You know, I would have put the shunting. And what the poster, which is the one they used, was the UK one, was generic people. It wasn't even any of the actors. A guy in a tuxedo and a elegant blonde, and she's kind of like lifting her face off of her face, with some sort of goo kind of connecting it. And I thought, but you know, in looking at it over, I never had much of an opinion about it. I was glad somebody did it. I wasn't like looking to do the campaign or anything. I liked the idea that other people would take it and run. I was surprised they didn't use the actual actors, but over the years especially, I thought, well, you know, that's a real smart image, I think, because even though you don't see that in the movie, you know, visually it kind of does represent it, you know, the face of people and the slug underneath or whatever.
That's
and
right.
They're rich, and so I certainly have no criticism of it. I have no criticism of how they handled it, and I don't think that certainly if it had had a big distribution behind it, you could have gotten some splash, and you could have gotten people at least go see it, and maybe it would have had more life. But I always figured that if the movie was played, probably you don't have to do, you know, you can't fault somebody for not making it happen.
Right.
But of course, if it got a big promotion and lots of advertising and it was featured a certain way, maybe it could have worked. I don't know.
Yeah, and I was always curious how it played. You took it to the market in Cannes. Well, they took it to the market in Cannes. I was curious how it would have played to an audience of not horror fans, you know, people from various international territories, what they would have thought
well,
of
they're
this.
always looking. They're looking for a genre movie, and they're the best I mean, they're the toughest audience. And
Sure, because they walk out after a few minutes. But this, you've got to really kind of get them.
You got to
the
stay
end.
there. You got to stay there. And I think that the genre people all paid attention to it, because it was something different. They're looking for something different. I don't know how you would. Maybe you could have sold this kind of more mainstream, but it didn't come out in the U.S. for a year or two after it came out in UK and other countries.
Yeah, and I don't remember it having huge coverage in Fangoria or anything like it did in the magazines in England.
Yeah, it was just not paid attention too much here. I think it wasn't quite gotten. And this is once again, here's Ben Slack again with the sort of the Rosemary's Baby moment. This is the Rosemary's Baby shot, I guess, as they fade out.
Yeah, you mentioned that Dr. X was probably the influence on this. Was there anything else that particularly resonated with you that led to this?
I think I certainly used, I mean, I'm, when you make a movie, all you have for source is other movies. So lots of these scenes came from other movies, for sure. I would say that, the shunting, that whole idea of melding flesh, I've traced back to seeing Dr. X when I was an adolescent, and the synthetic flesh, and just that whole idea of transformation, of flesh changing. I think that the turned into the shunting eventually. Something like Rosemary's Baby, of course, was very influential. I remember before making Reanimator, Stuart and I watched it a few times, and I think it was very influential on him with Reanimator. All those over-the-shoulder shots and not really sitting the camera down. But, I just subconsciously imitated other movies. And, for example, I think at the beginning with Blanchard looking out of the closet, that, for me, came from the Spiral Staircase. There's a scene with the guy inside, behind the clothes, looking out, and I think it came from, the Mario Bava used that a number of times. So I think the credit sequences, I draw a lot from other movies, I think it's pretty typical. I mean, and I think the really good directors now, the ones who are really accomplished, they tend to really study movies and study every action scene in a 7-Eleven and to see how they're going to do it. They study movies to make movies. I never did. I just made them as though you could make it out of whole cloth, in which case your influences are subconscious. Mm-hmm. When I worked with somebody like Stuart, he watched Rosemary's Baby and thought Polanski was a good model. But in fact, Stuart, he was doing his play he was adapting the techniques he learned to do theater in the movies. And so with him, that's what you notice most, I think, is how well the story's told with the actors. Whereas somebody like Christoph Gans that I worked with on Necronomicon and Crying Freeman, was a critic before he ever directed, and he knows movies like an encyclopedia. And there was nothing in the movie that wasn't referencing other movies.
Could you see that, or was that something he was telling you?
Well, he talked about it a lot, and I spent a couple years basically working with him. So I know when I produce a director, and I've produced, believe it or not, I think I counted it up, I've produced almost a dozen first-time directors. So I've worked with a lot of different directors. And normally when you work with a director, by the time you get into the shoot, you can pretty much predict how they're going to cover a scene. You get into their mentality and the language that they're going to use in a scene. You can predict it. With Christoph, I never could, because his references were so far, so much richer than mine. And he did it.
That's a good thing.
Seriously.
So it didn't.
I think everything's different. On the other hand, I'm not saying that does Stuart Gordon have to do it that way? No. Does Christoph have to do it his way? No. I think there's lots of, there's a lot of ways to skin a cat. And I think that everybody develops their own style, I think.
That's right. Roll out the red carpet. Bill Whitney never disappoints, huh? They said you were dead. Things are just the way they seem, only more so, Milo. What happened? What did they do to you? Nothing. I'm here, aren't I, huh? I won, Milo. I'm free. They couldn't handle Whitney the Wonder Boy. Bullshit, it's a setup. Look, they even brought your Chief here.
I guess you'd say that this is sort of kicking off the third act here. And I love this line, another Woody Keith line. Paranoid? I'm not paranoid. All my fears are real.
Paranoid? I'm not paranoid. All my fears are real.
When you were talking with Screaming Mad George about stuff, there was no precedent really for what you were doing. How did you actually get it? I mean, did you looked at Dali pictures and things like that?
Well, I had this, I'd had nightmares based on this synthetic flesh type of stuff. And when I thought about what would I like to see I thought, this is my chance directing. I get to decide. What do I want to see in effects? And I love rubber effects. And so I thought I'd like to see flesh melding. And I think the first image I had was he goes up to the bedroom and his parents are in there and their flesh is melding or something. And then I thought, well, how do you make sense out of that? How does that fit into it? What does that have to do with anything? And then as we evolved it, George had drawings and quite frankly, the shunting, if you look at it, it's based on a Dali painting with the big leg and everything. I think it's called The Great Masturbator or something. And the idea of things melding together became the theme. Mm-hmm. Then it was, what kind of images can we find? George had lots of images. He had sculptures. He had stuff like that. And so then the idea was to just try to make it make some aesthetic sense, not logic. There's no logic to it, but some aesthetic sense. And why are they doing it? That becomes another problem. It's like, why on earth are they doing it? We try, the idea of when they run up the stairs and the shrink has a hand for a head and he's got, you could say, well, that's the manipulating shrink, but that's back engineering. You go, oh, that looks cool. That would be cool there. Or this would be cool. And I think that that idea that, I've always been a fan of inspiration before the logic. And I think when you try to work up a story or something starting with the logic, it's sort of like you first want to just have a free sketch. Then you can worry about breaking it down and analyzing it, making a blueprint and making it fit. Here we have the screaming door thing. This is a repeat of the opening scene. So now in the original script, I think the script started with him driving to the shunting and hearing on the radio them talking about him. And here we tried to make something that repeated. So his nightmare is played out. Now he's really in it. Now we go, hey, not dreaming anymore. Mm-hmm. Something's really happening.
And in the original script, it was some kind of human sacrifice blood cult thing.
Yeah.
Do you remember more specifically how that would have been revealed in something like this coming up soon?
I don't remember. And I would probably have to look at the original script and look at our shooting script and see the differences to really be sure about that. I remember the stuff that I was heavily involved in kind of imagining, and so I might not, I don't really remember how it happened. I know we gave the thing a little different shape. All that stuff about the dolls and the screw in the head and the shrunken head and all that was in the original script. The idea that he was at the being the president, the idea that he went to the scenes with the shrink, all that stuff was in the original script. But anything to do with the shunting then is something that had to be kind of woven into it. And I presume that the reveal was similar. The difference is, of course, that I tried to make the shunting have a real sense to it, a real meaning to it. And also, but then you had to figure out why on earth would they go through all this trouble with this kid when all they have to do is grab him and put him in the shunting? Why do they do all this?
Mm-hmm.
And I think that the idea, for me it was, well, why do you make a big dinner out of something? Why don't you just eat some food pills? Why do you have a big elaborate 7-course meal? And I think this is where, for a lot of people, the movie really starts. Because then they go, what? Just a minute. I've been sitting here for an hour. And what? And I love that. I like that a lot about this movie. I don't know how many people would have the patience for it today.
Well, I think something that was always impressive, and I saw it several times theatrically, was that with different people who weren't into horror and with horror audiences, was that nobody could quite predict where it was going, that it was going to go to this. And I think that's what's audacious about the movie. And the fact that it maybe doesn't make complete sense doesn't really matter, because you really are going to see something that you had not been predicting all along.
And now we have one of my favorite guys, David Wiley, up there giving his speech. All these extras, we could afford some. That's Tom Renoni over there. There's Don Story.
So it is, yeah.
All these people here are mostly from the crew and our friends, because we couldn't afford many extras. So the only extras we got were ones that had their own formal get-up and were older. And everybody else is just like friends of ours, because that's how you make a movie, right?
So wait, people had to bring their own tuxes
well,
to get all squidgy?
Extras do. No, extras do. If you hire extras, say, we need cops. Well, you get an extra that has a cop uniform. Why worry about having to clothe them? And in this, I wanted people that looked older and respectable. Mm-hmm. So they should be able to wear, respectable clothes, and they should look older. We'll put the makeup on them.
So then the question is how did you explain it to them when they got there, what they were going to be doing?
I don't know if they ever really understood, but they read the script, and when they had to agree to take off their clothes and stuff like that and get methicellulose all over them.
Right.
Well, that's already, you're taking a big step. You get a certain type of people. You'd be surprised at actors, and especially extras who don't have they're not thinking they're going to be a star. They love doing stuff like that. You'd be surprised. One of the big surprises to me of making movies is how if you get a bunch of people in a room and turn on a camera, how they'll do almost anything.
Well, I found that as soon as you start doing something outrageous on a scene with a bunch of people, there's a much better vibe on the set than there is in something where it's just completely normal.
It's liberating.
Mm-hmm.
It's just liberating. There's Don Story is one of the investors. That's the production manager back there, Mike Muscal. These guys, of course, are all actors.
Mm-hmm.
So many of these, some of them are just from the crew. There's Tom Renoni again, looking smarmy. Tom Renoni ended up being the effects supervisor on some of a number of movies of mine. And I don't know if he ever directed a feature, but he directed some music videos with like the Ramones and people like that.
So basically the call for the extras here was you've got to come in a nice get-up and you're going to get very messy.
Yeah, and we're not going to mess up your clothes, though.
Right.
But if we do, we'll
you have to get naked.
We'll do the cleaning. We'll pay the cleaning. But this isn't a big studio production where you're going to provide everything. But this is typical with, I think, even a lot of medium budget movies. It's easier to get people to bring. A lot of actors will wear their own clothes. Here's the slugs, but they don't look much like slugs. I almost feel like you've got to make your own slugs if you want them to look right.
So they were actual slugs, but they didn't.
Well, they were
read
on the
that way.
plate like they're running around eating slugs. You know, this is just part of the scene. And here, of course, the lighting kind of gets a little bit different. It starts going towards the kind of oranges that Rick did the whole shunting with. See, I really like David Wiley. I thought he was a real legitimate kind of creepy judge. you
Yeah.
know.
And when you see the final big shunting thing, and also the hand head and the butt head and stuff like that, from what I understand, Screaming Mad George would make a miniature version of it first, and then you'd build it
Well,
from
you
there.
start with drawings. He had a lot of drawings, and then he made maquettes. That's pretty typical with the effects of the 80s.
Yep.
Most effects guys made maquettes. And then once the maquette was approved, then it would go big. Of course, this was quite a big sculpture that was done with lots of people to run it. I love how creepy this is, you know.
Yeah.
I thought that was really, I mean, there you are once again with that taboo. I don't think Patrice Jennings was really happy about doing this kind of stuff. You know, I think she was more in the Billy world.
Yeah.
Where she was kind of like, really? Is this what we're doing?
Calling her agent saying, what have you got me into?
What are we doing here, you know? And this is, of course, the big reveal, which I think also isn't predictable. I think it's a surprise.
We have a double header.
Blanchard.
After the first shunting,
How did you come up with the name Shunting?
That was a Woody Keith thing. I think when we were kind of, you know, I used to, back in that era, I had young kids, and I have a house in Outpost in Hollywood. And I would finally get the kids to bed. Then at about 11 o'clock or so, 12 o'clock, I would have people come over to work for scripts and work until about 3. So these would be late night sessions of just kind of brainstorming and just coming up with crazy stuff. And I'm sure that for everything that made the movie, there were another 5 or 10 that didn't for one reason or another. Now the light changed. Now we're into the oranges.
Did you ever get to a point in the late night sessions where you actually pushed it further and decided you better take it back for censorship reasons?
Not for censorship reasons. I always thought that I never really worried too much about censorship because I always figure it depends on how you cover it. You know, I mean, to me, this story in American culture tone probably is sort of in that Heather's parents thing, but in regular, you know, in the kind of aristocratic horror type thing, you're into the world of what is it, The Hour of the Wolf. I mean, these are art movies. Bergman is similar, or what's the one, the famous Italian one, Salò. So I think that it's not like the story is there. It's just how you do it, what you're looking at.
Goodbye, David.
Now it's George, Screaming Mad George. All this stuff is so effective because it's real. And the whole big thing has 12 people inside it, underneath all that rubber making it work, you know.
And you had a removable, it was built up from the floor, right?
Yeah,
So
we had to build the floor up high. so people could hide under to run it. And we really, back then, you couldn't really have a lot of monitors and stuff. And there's no way to get rid of wires. And, I mean, this is a different era for movie making. And in some ways, it's great because I think with special effects, there's something about puppets that are very real in a way that animation isn't. And I think today, so many of the effects are animated CGI. And a lot of people recognize that they're less effective. It doesn't, I mean, I love CGI, but I also know that even on a movie like Gravity, which just was out this year, it's probably 75% animation. I mean, the people, the suits, everything, and it's just done really realistically. But there is that feeling that everything's kind of moving around a little better than it should.
Yes.
And I think that with puppets, you can put a hand puppet on somebody. I mean, George, for example, could put on a hand puppet and bring it to life. Whereas an animator making drawings come to life is tough. This is a great scene. I mean, this is probably the peak, right?
Yeah.
Of the whole thing. And this is where we had to cut out some of it for the MPAA.
Oh, you did?
Oh, yeah.
So it was censored when it came out in the US?
Yeah.
Because this was
a little bit.
This was one of the things in England was very censorial at the time.
And they let it go.
And then they let it go because it wasn't something that could be considered realistic, something that could happen.
Yeah. Well, I think a lot of that stuff was kind of foolish. See, here we do the hair thing again, still trying to make it come together. But wow, what a great... Well, he really gets into it.
Yeah, he does.
He really takes it and runs.
And you find an actor like that, when you're explaining it to them, he's just like, okay, let's do it.
Yeah.
There was no question of, I don't know what the hell I'm doing.
Actors,
it's fantastic.
Yeah, are not what, they're actors.
Yeah.
And they really like to play.
Yeah.
I think where you run into trouble is when they're trying to keep their dignity.
Yeah.
And they want to maybe be celebrities or stars more than actors.
Yep.
And that's another level. But I think just the basic idea of an actor, the person who likes to be an actor, who acts, I think they're some of the most kind of adventurous and open-minded people of any profession. They really go for it,
Yeah, once they've committed to it, they want to commit to it the whole way.
I think Rick did a great job on the creepy, sort of the shadowy lighting and stuff. George hated that I used this effect, this face for him, because it wasn't finished and I needed it. He didn't have the appliances. And I said, well, I'm not going to see it that well. And then, of course, we did. And he always gave me a hard time forevermore. So he didn't want people seeing that effect.
Yeah.
And I love this one, of course, because this is like, what is going on? What is going on here? And these are just Screaming Mad George sketches,
Yeah.
It's like picking and choosing. It wasn't like, let's have the shrink have a hand for a head. It was George makes all these drawings. You go, hey, that's his head, and let's double it up for the hand.
Right.
This, I think, was an effect that another one where I feel like it didn't quite work well enough. This could have really benefited from a little bit of CGI to mix things together. She's totally unrealistic looking. This doesn't work, That I'm not so fond of. But it would have been great to have real arms there, which you could do today.
Yes.
Right. And then the dialogue even doesn't work here because you can't understand it. It should be much clearer, If you have any Oedipal fantasies you'd like to indulge in, now's the time, Billy.
Right.
Well, that's really funny.
Yeah.
But it's so fast, and the way it's mic'd or something, I don't think it really gets across. It doesn't get you that beat.
Well, son, I guess you're right. I am a butthead.
And this, of course, is great. He delivers it with all the right timing. And then I've always been looking for the rest of the outtakes on that. See, that doesn't quite work. But I always look for the outtakes on him because afterwards he just improvised and started singing songs.
Oh,
and
wow.
all kinds of stuff in that butthead thing. And this is great. So for me, by the time we were doing this, I had put a sign on the outside of the stage, above the stage, saying, you know, abandon hope, all ye who enter here. And I think we did the shunning for about 3 days. So here's
there's
the
the
big
whole
one.
thing.
Yeah, there's a dozen people running that.
So all the puppeteers were
and you know,
under
that
the
was
ground?
Chaz Balin, the horror writer,
Gorsko,
was right there. That's Tom Ranoni again right there. But anyway, that's Tom right there getting the eyeball. I've lost my train of thought. It looks like so much fun. I just want to join in, you know. And everybody was upset because that methacellulose is really cold when you put it on. Then it dries and gets kind of wrinkles your skin a little bit painfully, you know. And this is what I love, is you get an extra like that, you know. She's a very respectable woman. You bring, and then you give her some spaghetti and some methacellulose and a nightgown, and you've got a performance that can't be beat.
Right. And she got a close-up moment.
Of course. A great appreciation from the director for going there. You know?
Leave her alone! Oh, well. Look what we have here. You're going to rescue...
And this was in the script, this final battle between Billy and Ferguson wasn't in the original script.
Oh, it wasn't?
No, that actually Keith Wally pushed that very hard. He said, "Man, you got to make a big fight out of them at the end. You got to have the mano a mano," and he was exactly right. There's without it, there's sort of a drama missing to the ending.
Yep.
You can't have them just pop up. It's got to be the fight with the bad guy. Then we had to figure out how to get rid of this. So here was the cheap version of how you get rid of the shunting. Everything just melts down in the smoke, you know. I think colored lights and smoke and slime was always my solution to almost anything in the movies, you know. You got to say, you know, and here's, this guy's pretty funny. We got the little cracks in the back.
Yeah.
Which I thought that was a good touch.
That works
you know?
perfectly.
Yeah. That's what I like.
Mm-hmm.
And then we have David Wiley to finish it off, and he's hilarious. Now we see that, wow, when you shunt, you take on characteristics of the... And I like how he goes, I'm getting too old. That's Blanchard's beauty mark.
Mm-hmm.
Beauty mark. I'm getting too old for this.
Nan! Jim! Hey, come on, you guys!
Now this guy talking here, listen to, we'll be right up. Somehow that was never ADR'd. That's the voice of the script supervisor, Mark Thomas. And that was on set, shot like that, and somehow it missed the ADR session. Whenever I hear it, I say, doesn't anybody know that's not the voice of my father?
No.
The master of the hunt. The champion of the shunt. Ted the tycoon. Ferguson. In this corner.
It was really hard to try to figure out a logic for this whole shunting.
Yeah.
To think that they actually do this, and now I've got it all straight. You know, I figured out the whole thing, you know, and where they came from and how it all worked.
Go on, tell us.
But I thought that at the time it was like hard to figure out, now why don't they just do this? Why don't they do that? And then you figure, it's just entertainment.
Yeah, so
It's just something you do. It's not a big thing. This isn't like a peak moment in history or anything. It's just kind of what goes on, behind those big walls and stuff, I had to come up with that solution. That's why we have lines like "Master of the Hunt," or the champion of the shunt. That they would raise a kid for years just to be able to put on a shunt, and it's like having a ball. It's culture. But the argument for me was the reason that they do it is just the same reason that you spike a breed of a dog. If you have a purebred dog, like a German Shepherd, it'll get hip dysplasia because the limited gene pool hurts the breed. And for the aristocrats, the blue bloods, literally here, if you keep intermarrying, you end up with idiots, and so they need to get the mongrels and kind of spike their species. See, this was all inspired by Woody Keith, by having these having him throw against the wall and doing real stunts. Dan Bradley was the stunt guy. The idea in my mind was that humanity was all sort of they were all sort of the same until this weird kind of predatory, this life force came up from the ground and sort of entered into the bodies of certain ones and made them able to dominate and take advantage of the others. So there was actually an actual different species. It's a different, they just take the form of the humans, They're a parasite. And that's the aristocrats in every culture, every race. And so that's sort of a science fiction horror way of giving form to the fact that people who have power and are rich, they are different.
Was any of that particular allegory in the project you were developing with Dan O'Bannon before this?
Exactly. It was with the alien men, that's very similar. I love that. I mean, and that was, of course, a wipe behind his back, which you had to do back then because you didn't have CGI. This was a pretty crude effect, but I think given what's going on, it's all kind of okay.
And the fact that you never kind of explain why the lighting turns red at one point, but it definitely sells the effects very well.
And then here, he was supposed to be full of slugs and worms and stuff, but unfortunately, real-sized ones just don't look good enough. And I always regretted that I didn't just get a bunch of eels. When you pulled it out, that there'd just be all these eels writhing around, because it should have been bigger to get the effect across.
Yeah.
And of course, that's a cartoony look, but that's absolutely what I just wanted it to be more in your face, And here we have the final battle with the dad. And Charles Lucia does a great job of being the putz, the dope falling to the ground.
Butthead.
Which was a big word back then. In the 80s, butthead was kind of a big word. And of course, as I've said before, the whole point of this was that nobody's following them. They're like escaping with a gun. But it's kind of like, it's not a big deal. What are they going to do? Go to the authorities?
Right. Explain what happened.
It's like, you will never believe it. The rich, they're taking, their society is taking advantage of us. So, and the whole, all it means to them, nobody's like running around.
It looks as though I may have an opening in Washington next summer.
That's all it means to them. And that shot right there, I was very proud because when Empire Magazine, which is the big magazine in the UK for movies actually, and they did the top 50 most gross scenes in movie history. Okay, you've got to go for something. And number one was Society, so they had the shunting, and they had a 2-page spread of that shot. And I thought, yeah.
That's like an Oscar, Brian.
Well, not really, but
I would
but you've
think
got
so.
to take it where it comes, and if you like weird stuff, then at least revel in it.
Absolutely.
But it was definitely, I would say that it was certainly one of the highlights of my time, my experiences making movies was doing the shunting. It was certainly a kind of transgressive liberty.
And it's a movie you're still proud of.
I like it. I'm glad that anybody watches it anymore. I'm glad that we're doing this because it means people are watching it. And actually, even though it was never really made any, really wasn't seen by many people in the U.S. at least. In the last 5 or 6 years, it seems like it's gotten a revival. And now, I was thinking now they should sell it as the Revenge of the 1%.